A small town is haunted by strange phone calls, according to the Midnight Caller. The story began on a cool night in October in the charming little hamlet of Oakridge, where everything began. Oakridge, which was located in the middle of the countryside, was the kind of area where everyone knew everything that was going on in the lives of their neighbors. But what started out as an ordinary evening for the people who lived in Oakridge quickly evolved into something that could have been taken straight from a horror film. At around midnight, the first telephone call that was reported to be weird was received. Mrs. Thompson, an old widow who lived on the outskirts of town by herself, asserted that her phone had rung 3 times in rapid succession and that each time there was a spooky silence that followed. She went back to her knitting and shrugged it off, assuming that it was just a hoax call or that the number was incorrect from the beginning. However, after that, calls began to come in from throughout the entire city. A number of individuals have reported that they received calls at precisely midnight, and each time they picked up the phone, there was complete quiet on the other end. Some people even asserted that they had heard weird noises or faint whispers in the background, such as someone breathing hard or shuffling around. It was only natural that rumors started to proliferate like wildfire. The ghost of Old Man Jenkins, the village hermit who had passed away under inexplicable circumstances many years ago, was claimed to be present by these individuals. Some others thought it was the work of a prankster who was trying to play a cruel joke on the residents of Oakridge who were unaware of what was going on. However, as the days stretched into weeks and the calls persisted without explanation, the town was overcome with panic on a scale that had never been seen before. People started avoiding answering their phones after dark, and those who were bold enough to pick up the phone described feeling an overpowering sense of dread sweep over them. The authorities here were at a loss for words. After tracing the calls back to a number of different payphones located all around the town, they discovered that there was never anyone present at any of the payphones when they arrived. The sounds were so eerie that it seemed as if they were coming from the afterlife itself. Tensions reached a fever pitch as Halloween drew closer around the corner. The community, which had been very tight in the past, was now divided by dread and suspicion. On the other hand, some people believed that their neighbors were the ones responsible for the calls, while others locked themselves inside their homes, sure that whatever was calling them in the middle of the night was something that came from another realm. Following that, on the evening of Halloween, an event occurred that caused shockwaves to travel throughout Oakridge. Immediately after the clock hit midnight, each and every phone in the town started ringing at the same time. It was a sound that reverberated throughout the streets, and it sent shivers down the spines of everyone who became aware of it. When folks picked up their phones, their hands were shaking as they prepared themselves for whatever horror was waiting for them on the other end of the line. On the other hand, this time there was a voice rather than quiet. "I know what you did." Every person who lived in Oakridge felt a chill run down their spine as they heard those words. In addition to being low and gravelly, the voice was dripping with hatred. The words it spoke were delivered with such a terrifying surety that they caused fear to course through the veins of all who heard them. People were hurriedly trying to disconnect their phones, but the calls continued to come in, and each time they did, they repeated the same scary message, "I know what you did." This caused anxiety to spread across the streets. The days that followed were marked by a pervasive sense of fear and distrust across the town. During the time that everyone was searching for someone to blame for the terror that had befallen them, accusations were flying and friendships were being seriously damaged. In spite of their best efforts, however, they were unable to determine the origin of the calls themselves. Some individuals asserted that it was a hoax, while others were of the opinion that it was the product of something far more nefarious. In spite of the fact that the truth could be unknown, there was one thing that was certain: the Midnight Caller had irrevocably altered the tranquil town of Oakridge, leaving behind a legacy of fear and mystery that would continue to torment the people who lived there for many years to come. The peaceful enclave of Oakridge, which was situated in the middle of undulating hills and thick forests, was characterized by a placid existence in which the rhythm of life flowed smoothly like a peaceful river. However, hidden beneath the surface of this gorgeous village was a shadowy presence that posed a threat to the town's otherwise tranquil appearance. When Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow who lived in a lovely cottage on the outskirts of Oakridge, reported an unsettling occurrence on a crisp fall evening, it was the first indication that something was wrong. In her fragile voice, she recalled how at the stroke of midnight her phone rang 3 times in rapid succession, with each ring being interrupted by an eerie quiet that hung thick in the air. Her voice trembled as she related the experiences. In the beginning, Mrs. Thompson thought it was nothing more than a simple malfunction or a joke, but she eventually shrugged it off and attributed it to the peculiarities of old technology or the mischievous nature of young people. On the other hand, as the days progressed, tales of a similar nature began to pour in from all across the town, creating a web of anxiety and doubt that encircled Oakridge in its chilly grasp. The calls manifested themselves with a disturbing regularity, and they came at precisely the witching hour, as if they were a terrible omen of impending disaster. In hushed tones, residents spoke in murmured voices, while phantom noises emerged from the other end of the line, chilling them to the bone with their spectral presence. Residents chatted in hushed tones. Speculations whirled around like leaves of autumn that had been caught in a raging wind. Some people spoke about restless souls that were bound to this world by unresolved grudges or affairs that had not been completed. A number of individuals pondered the possibility that there was a terrible entity that was hiding in the shadows and preying against the residents of Oakridge who were unaware of its presence. Due to the fact that the local authorities were perplexed by the occurrence that could not be explained, they initiated investigations to determine the origins of the calls. Nevertheless, their efforts resulted in nothing but irritation and perplexity, as the evasive caller appeared to evade detection, leaving behind only a trail of questions that were left unanswered and a growing sense of dread. The feeling of anxiety that was prevalent throughout the town increased in tandem with the lengthening of the evenings and the intensification of the darkness. People started to avoid the darkness, pulling themselves into their homes and locking their doors to protect themselves from the shadows that were getting closer. Due to the presence of the phantom of terror that lurked beneath the cover of night, the streets of Oakridge, which were previously teeming with activity, turned silent. With Halloween just around the corner, the level of stress reached an all-time high. There was a widespread prevalence of superstitions and paranoia, which fueled the production of outlandish hypotheses and amazing stories that spread across the town like wildfire. At the same time that some people muttered of curses and hexes being cast upon the town, others spoke about ancient rites and dark powers that had awoken from their slumber. On the terrible night of Halloween, the town was engulfed in darkness as the clock struck midnight. This event will forever be remembered. All of the phones in Oakridge started ringing at the same time, and the extremely high-pitched tones of the phones cut through the silence like a blade. As the residents braced themselves for the horrors that were waiting on the other end of the line, they hesitated because they were filled with anxiety. They looked at each other with scared glances as they prepared themselves. "I know what you did." The words, which were delivered with such a terrifying certainty that they sent shivers down the spine of everyone who heard them, hung thick in the air like a foreboding omen. The foreboding message continued to reiterate itself, and with each repetition, the unavoidable reality that something malignant had taken root in the core of Oakridge became more and more apparent. This caused panic to develop. The community was left in a state of disarray as a result of the tragic event that occurred that night, with its formerly beautiful existence being shattered by the phantom of the midnight caller. An unseen danger that was hiding in the shadows caused accusations to fly, friendships to fall apart, and trust to become a scarce commodity. All of these things occurred concurrently. Despite the fact that the calls finally stopped, the scars that they left behind would continue to be visible for many years to come. These scars would serve as a chilling reminder of the precarious nature of tranquility and the darkness that can be found in even the most peaceful of locations. Consequently, the legend of the Midnight Caller would continue to be passed down from generation to generation, with those who recalled the fear that had settled upon Oakridge like a creeping fog on a night without the moon, whispering it in hushed tones.